Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Rosen Sports Monday, brought to you by Alexis of Wayzata, Alexis of Maplewood, our friend Charlie Swanson in charge, and we'll hear from Lexus a little bit later in the program. Jon Krawczynski, Johnny Athletic, is my guest today. It's a bright, sunny day, but there's definitely a pall over the air in the Twin City area, basically around the National Hockey League. The devastating news over the weekend of the loss of Jessi Pierce, her kids, Hudson, Caden, Avery, in a house fire in White Bear Lake. A little bit of a backstory. My daughter works at WCCO TV in the digital department, and I got up Saturday morning and I saw the story about this tragedy in White Bear Lake at a house fire, and I didn't, obviously they didn't announce anything. And then my daughter called me and said, "Dad, we're hearing that there was a woman who works for the Wild that was involved, that was living there." I went, and all of a sudden my head is spinning. I'm thinking, I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, and it doesn't really matter. But I mean, what an awful tragedy anyway. And then the day went on and went on and on. I hadn't heard anything. I know the Wild played in the afternoon, and I was busy with other things. And I got home, and all of a sudden I saw a few social media posts, and that's the first time I saw Jessi Pierce's name mentioned. And I texted our good friend Kevin Gorg, and I think he got back to me like at 1:30 in the morning. I can only imagine what those guys were going through, and said, "Yeah, unfortunately, it's true." And man, I just took a deep breath. I couldn't even sleep at that point. And I had interactions I had with Jessi were limited when I went to the Wild press box over the years, especially the last 7-8 years. And there's kind of a running joke. Oh, Rosie's at the Wild game. Let's take a picture with them. I don't go that often, but I did when I was working at WCCO. But every single time I'd run into Jessi, she goes, "I got to take a picture with you because show that you're here." I went, "Jessi," and we'd have a good laugh and talk, and we would take a picture. And even when my daughter was up there a couple times working, and Chloe met her, and Chloe took a picture with her. And so when I told Chloe that it was Jessi, she just broke down because it shows you, even in a limited amount of time, the impact Jessi had on people, whether you were working every single day in the Wild organization, or like my daughter or anybody else, that she met you once or twice. I mentioned in a tweet that I had in response to what Judd Zalgad had written, and of course Michael Russo wrote just a spectacular tribute to her. And I said, Jessi earned her stripes by being present. Her sparkling personality was her hallmark, but her work ethic was the reason she was so damn good at her job. And it's something to see, and I'll bring Jon Krawczynski into the conversation right now, the outpouring of grief and tributes to Jessi Pierce from every team in the National Hockey League. The people that she touched individually, collectively, they knew about her. And I'm sure she would be kind of, blown away by the amazing reaction and tributes that she's getting. And let's not lose track of, Johnny, this is just a unspeakable tragedy. Not only losing Jessi, but her 3 children, and her husband, of course, Mike, out of town on business, now has to go on with his life somehow, some way. You met Jessi a couple times, I know, and anybody who met her, she just has this unforgettable personality. In our business, we're all kind of callous about little things, this and that, and we, have our little interactions. But what kind of memories and interactions did you have with Jessi, Jon?
Yeah, like you, Rosie. I mean, I didn't spend a ton of time over at the Wild, but when we first started the Athletic in Minnesota, 8-9 years ago almost now, we were building something from scratch. And
Right.
So it was the sort of the Wild West, trying to get help wherever we could, just build a little staff, like get content out there. And Jessi Pierce was one of the kind of like pseudo backups for Michael Russo on the Wild in the very early days. And I just remember the first time I think that I ever met her, we used to do at the very early stage, we had these marketing kind of things where we'd go to a bar and, do a panel discussion and meet fans and, advertise the Athletic. We always brought, kind of everyone who was writing for us there as well to participate in. And Jessi was there. And she came up and said hello. And like what you sort of just kind of felt right away was the energy that she brought to any room that she was in. She just filled it all the way up. Like, the light in her eyes was amazing. She was so infectiously enthusiastic, and she was so confident in herself. Like, back then, this was before her podcast, before she had really gotten super established in our industry. And, you know, it was me and Russo and Gleeman and you know, a bunch of guys. And like, she just fit right in with all of us and looked like she belonged. And then to like watch her build her career and in such a way that was so unique to her was incredibly impressive. Like, she embraced the sort of voice that she found as a journalist, but also as kind of like a fan, and really resonated with her listeners. And she worked with Kirsten Kroll on their Bar Down Beauties thing, and like they really like produced something that was really unique in the space, and that's really hard to do. And I just was always so amazed by how she was able to just use her infectious enthusiasm and love for this job and scratch and claw her way into a position of relevance in the market as a woman in this business. Like, not easy to do at all, Rosie. Just an incredible person.
No, I mean, it was, we all know, I mean, it's changed, thankfully changed, but especially, you know, I can tell you horror stories about growing up in this business, and we're male dominated business. And to see her impact, and as you mentioned, there's no substitute for hard work. And what an inspiration for young women who want to get into this business, to show that this is how you do it. And she was, you know, not boastful about it, but it just shows you that roll up your sleeves. You can get this done. You can get it done. And I think that her legacy will continue on for a long, long time. But beyond the work part of it, I just keep thinking, and she was also, of course, first and foremost, a mom and a wife, and losing her kids. I mean, I can't wrap my mind around the context, and this is why there's such an outpouring. And I'm sure the Wild will respond when they have their first home game. That part of it, you know, it's going to be great, but all that. But it's her loss, and it's her loss, our loss, and it's just it's just numbing. It's the only word I can come up with to think about what the family is going through right now.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Rosie, like what I thought about on Saturday when I found out that it was her, was it took me back to when I heard the first reports that Kobe Bryant and his daughter died in a helicopter crash. And you know, like it was obviously more personal because I knew Jessi, and you know, and we were friends, and all of that. But when you add in the loss of children to it, it just like you know, it takes your breath away.
Well, especially since she had just posted that picture, I think like the day before, right? They're having
the day before they went for ice cream. You know, I watched the end of her podcast with Judd, and two of the kids kind of came on at the end, and they were hamming it up a little bit. And you knew like that one of the most amazing things about Jessi was that she was able to be a wonderful mother while doing all of this. And she included her kids in like this crazy life that we all lead. You know, when you try to do this job, you give up a lot of yourself to it, and it can be hard on families, but you always knew that Jessi was bending over backward to make sure that, yes, she's doing this really cool and exciting thing, but man, she's bringing her children along for the ride with it. And what an experience. And so, you know, you saw the video of them together on Judd's pod, and it just like, I mean, you couldn't help but break down. Heart. Like, it's just tragic. But I cannot like underscore how amazing and overwhelming it's been to watch the entire hockey community respond. Like Andrew Brunette, you know, Mikhail Grant, like all of these people, you know, all over the nation and the globe they knew Jessi because of the impact and the presence that she had. Like, you couldn't be in a room with her and not feel her presence. And so
I'm trying to put this in perspective from a work standpoint, because, Jessi Pierce, I mean, most people, I don't know who that is. I have no idea. I've never, and, with all the big names in broadcasting and women, the impact, obviously a lot of women have made in sports broadcasting. And this proves you don't have to be, a superstar broadcaster or writer or whatever the case may be, that her impact and her influence and her work ethic and her friendliness and her association, I'm not being afraid to ask the tough questions around the Wild, that she earned everyone's respect. And that's the thing that, and still, as you know, as a dad, and, I had, when my kids were really young, when I was in the midst of everything I was doing, it's not an easy balancing act. And Jessi, as you said, did it with a smile and did it with passion and included her kids. So there's not much more we can say right now other than our prayers to the family, and her legacy will live on. And we try to move on because that's what we have to do. And that's the way life is. But man, I even turned to my wife the other day. I went, this is why when we're taking this trip, whatever, it's another reminder every day. And I know you were at the game, the Gopher women's game with your daughter. And you just kind of go, man, I got to absorb all this because this is really what matters. That's it. So, John, we'll move on from there. And it's just, there's not an easy transition to go from talking about something so horrific over this weekend to what we do for a living. And that's talk other sports, in particular, your specialty, the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I kind of made our little pasta dinner at home last night. And I snuggled into the old, man cave and watched the Wolves. I thought, oh boy, they're going to get blown out in Boston. They've lost 20. They haven't won a game there in 21 years. They ain't going to win tonight without Ant. And they got behind early, like as they're wont to do, and they rallied and they had this astonishing fourth quarter. They win 102-92. How surprised were you with not just the way they came back and won, but how they won, and maybe setting the table for, even when Ant comes back, what this team may look like down the stretch and into the playoffs?
Yeah, Rosie, I mean, in so many ways, like, it defied logic that they would go into Boston and win and do all this. But in some ways, for this team, it was like, you know what, that makes sense, because I can't figure these guys out. They will play really poorly against Portland on Friday, and then they go into Boston and win. But the thing that kind of just stood out the whole way through was Bones Hyland. And like, this has been an angst-ridden season, Rosie, with the expectations, with kind of a team that has been really moody and hasn't, really kind of shown the energy consistently throughout the year. But Bones is just so much fun. Like, he is energy and he is positivity and he is electricity. And he came into the game when the rest of the team could not make a shot to save their lives, and he just started firing and making them. And he's doing his little celebration. He's like pointing at defenders. Like, he was the energy and the light that this team has needed. And he's played really, really well most of the season, but especially even since Ant has gone out. He's averaging around 20 points a game, just giving them what they need. And this is a team like that gets in the doldrums pretty easily. So when Bones gets rolling like that, man, it makes a really big difference. And I think it gives them a bit of juice and a jolt that otherwise they have a hard time manufacturing. So Bones had a great game. I would assume he had a great game. They played really, really well defensively as a group and got one of their best wins of the season in a time that they desperately needed it.
And Naz Reid returned with some spectacular plays as well, 11.7 rebounds and just a lot of one-on-one. But the ferocity that he played with late in that game. And I mean, you mentioned Bones. It's like he's shot out of a cannon when he goes, downhill. And it kind of goes against the grain of what we see. And, this is not about Ant and what the team is necessarily going to look like, but does it change Chris Finch's mindset a little bit about the team he wants out there that can give them the best chance to win in the fourth quarter when Ant comes back and like maybe play a little smaller overall, Randall's not out there. Of course, Randall looks like he got in the doghouse. I mean, Finch called him out the other night after not getting enough rebounds, and he went 3 for 14 last night. and he was on the bench at crunch time. So, I mean, I don't know what. I mean, Chris is not afraid to make these moves, but it's going to be really interesting when Ant gets back about what not just the way this team is going to be, the makeup of the team, but how they're going to play when they get into the postseason.
Yeah, I think that Chris Finch is finally sort of at a position where he's just going to say, look, guys, we got to do whatever it takes to win on a nightly basis. And he's really tried hard to cultivate a relationship of trust with Julius Randle, to stick by him through all of the thick and thin. And generally it's worked out for him. Julius was great in the playoffs last year.
Right.
And Chris didn't give up on him. But I thought that him kind of calling Julius out after the Portland game for only having three defensive rebounds was a step across a line that he has not crossed in the last 2 years with Julius. Like, he's really just been epically positive with Julius in public, and that was a kind of sign of like, look, things are changing a little bit here and we're getting desperate. And I thought last night against Boston, not only was Julius kind of out for long stretches, Rudy Gobert did not play a lot at all down the stretch, even after having a really good first half, because it just wasn't working. Going smaller was what they needed to do against the Boston Celtics. And so I think that they are at a point in this season of trying to find the right chemistry of like, look, there's not going to be any more sacred cows. We're just going to do whatever we have to do to win. And if you don't like that, that's more of a reflection on you than it is on the coaching staff or the team. And so when Ant comes back, I think there is going to be a little bit of a process of reacclimation. But one thing that was interesting of what Finch said after the game against Boston was that one thing they have to make sure of is that when Ant comes back, Bones stays in attack mode. And Bones has talked about it. When Ant is out there, he feels obligated to get Ant shots. And that's understandable. But Bones is most dangerous when he's looking for his own offense as well. And so they have to find a way to keep him in that groove when Anthony Edwards returns. And I think that Ant watching this from afar probably helps him see exactly how he has to do things when he comes back. So this could be a benefit all the way around.
What sense do you get about Ant in terms of his recovery right now and how the Wolves are going to approach him getting ready for the postseason? Because obviously they want to knock off the rust before they open up against, we don't know whom right now, but they're in the 6th spot. They could end up at probably 4, 5, or 6 the way it looks right now. The Lakers are playing awfully well. But what's your sense about Ant's timetable getting back, and then how they're going to look at him in playing time?
Yeah, so they said, last week when he went out, they said it would be a 1 to 2 week kind of time frame until he's reevaluated. They made that intentionally vague because Ant is kind of historically been a Wolverine-like healer. Like his body just responds really, really well, usually to rehab and treatment. And so he's been away from the team, just getting rehab and resting and keeping that knee up and elevated. And so this will be a big week for him in terms of when he returns, because it kind of sets up nicely, Rosie. They have Monday and Tuesday off, and then they play Wednesday, and then they have Thursday and Friday off, and then they play Saturday. Only 2 games this week is a rarity in the NBA.
Sure is.
And so my guess is that he would still miss Wednesday's game against Houston, and then you really start to look at Detroit on Saturday as a possibility. But we will get to practice on Tuesday and kind of just see where things are with him and see how he is progressing. But I would imagine, as long as things are going okay with his rehab and everything, sometime in the next full week or so is I think you'll really start to see a ramp up and him try to get back out there. But we just have to see how his body is responding, and we'll get a little more information on that, I think, on Tuesday.
We all know how difficult a road any team's going to have to get through that rigors of the Western Conference. But do you still look at OKC and San Antonio as a step ahead of everybody else, a lot more than a step ahead of everyone else, or do you think that they're all going to have issues and difficulty in just advancing no matter who they play of those top 6 in particular.
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, I do think that OKC and San Antonio are on a different tier. I will say that for most of the season, I haven't been worried about the Lakers at all, but now I am concerned about that. I mean, just with the way that they're playing, with the way that Luka Doncic is playing, they've won 9 in a row, and they look to be coming together at the right time. And so, if I'm looking at the field, I think that the Wolves have the best chance if they could get up into the 4-5 and play either Houston or Denver in that first round of advancing. I still would like them against the Lakers, but I think it would be a lot harder than I initially anticipated. And then you get into the second round, and both Oklahoma City and San Antonio have been playing at such a high level that, I mean, pack a lunch and see what happens. It's not impossible. I think the Wolves can look at it and say, if we can continue to find a groove with our defense, especially consistency-wise, and you get Ant back and you incorporate him, they have enough individual talent to beat any of these teams in a series. It's just, will this talent coalesce and play as a group, which they haven't really done all season? If they don't do that, they could be one and done, or they could, get wiped out in the second round against one of those two really good teams. But it's a wide open West. But I like Oklahoma City and San Antonio at the top a little bit more than the rest.
One more question about the Wolves. Watching them play in that fourth quarter in particular, you talk about their defense, and that's a mindset as much as anything else, I think. But my goodness, even Boston was talking about it after the game. Brown and a couple of those guys saying, man, they just shut us down. And, it's like, well, what's the key? How do they, it's hard work. Their transition game was phenomenal. I love Jaden McDaniel's game last night. But can they, if they play at that level, they can beat anybody. I mean, they were suffocating the Celtics when they crossed midcourt. Dante may not be scoring, but man, he gets in their chops when he's guarding somebody. And it seems like a lot of those things are just falling into place. And then they go from defense to offense, and they look like a completely different team.
They do, Rosie, and I think like one of the keys for them defensively is having pressure on the ball on the perimeter. And like when you have Dosunmu and Dante, and even Bones is starting to give like at least effort on that end, and it's not a layup line, it's not a free run to the rim where you have to just rely on Rudy to erase everything. I think that it just makes a huge difference. The other part that was really different last night, and I will give Julius Randle credit for this, he had 9 rebounds last night, and he responded to what Finch was challenging him with, and in general, they were rebounding the ball at a really high rate, and they've been getting killed on the offensive glass, all season long. But if they can limit opponents to 1 or maybe 2 max shots on a possession, man, that just changes everything for them. It's given up constantly 3 and 4 shots, every possession. That just makes it impossible for them to get stops. And so you get Dosunmu rebounding the well. Dante is a really good rebounder. Julius being a guy that gets 7, 8, 9 boards is key. And then Rudy had 14. And so that's such a key for them is to limit the second chance opportunities. When they do that, they are a really good defense. And that's what they got to keep carrying forward here.
And let's make this clear, despite their wonderful performance, especially in the fourth quarter last night, for anyone who thinks that this team is better without Anthony Edwards in the lineup, needs to have their head checked. Because when you get in the postseason in particular, bring it to the ticket, as they used to say, as Kevin Garnett would say, Ant's the closer.
For sure.
Change.
No question. I mean, the ball moves a little bit differently, I think, when Ant is out. That's an advantage, but especially in the playoffs, you hit on it, Rosie. Like a lot of these teams, like you see, hey, Phoenix has had a really fun season, and Miami, and a lot of these quote unquote starless teams, like they play hard and they win games in the regular season, but in the playoffs, you need stars to be stars, and that's what Ant is in the playoffs. Like especially in these early rounds, that first and second round, man, when he gets a week to prepare and practice and go over the game plan, and then he feels that electricity in the arena, there are very few players that reach his level. And that is what you need in a series to beat the Lakers, to beat the Nuggets, to beat any of these teams, is you need Anthony Edwards at his peak. And he often gives you his peak in the playoffs. And they are a different team when he is defending and then when he is knocking down shots in the clutch. And so they desperately do need him back. This has been a nice little 3 wins in 4 games stretch. But if they want to go anywhere, Ant's going to be the one that takes them there.
And the Twin Cities would love to see nothing more than the Wild and the Wolves continue to play as the weather gets warmer into the month of May, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully a lot to look forward to. We're going to take a break right now. Johnny K was at the Gopher women's basketball game yesterday. I want to get his thoughts on not just the game itself, but the atmosphere as they get ready for the Sweet 16. So we'll be back after this word from Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. Hey, Rosie here for Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. As I have told you, I recently purchased a new Lexus RX, and it is fantastic. The best car I've ever driven. Lots of room for a tall guy like me, and it just drives like a dream. Charlie Swanson and his staff have been so good to me, and I can't say enough about the wonderful treatment I've received from the service department to the people at the front desk. They're all very welcoming. We purchased an all-gas model, but keep in mind it also comes in a hybrid and a plug-in hybrid. I think my wife is going to do an NX Lexus this spring. So go to Lexus of Wayzata or Lexus of Maplewood and come and see what they have that works for you. And welcome back to Rosen Sports Monday. My special guest, Johnny Athletic, Jon Krawczynski, who was at Williams Arena at the barn yesterday with your daughter. Is that correct?
Yeah, my 11-year-old daughter. She just turned 11 on Friday, so a nice little birthday weekend thing for her. And it was like I said, Rosie, I looked at tickets on Saturday, and they were $25, and I'm just like, how could we not? Like, let's just do this. And it was just a wonderful experience. We had a great time.
Well, I saw you tweet something out and went $25, $26 for a ticket, $10 for parking. And I thought some of the reaction you got was like, are people thinking it was too much to spend?
Yeah. No.
I went, no. You know what the prices of anything are right now, to say nothing of filling up your tank to get there. So take us to Williams, and I'm sure seeing it through the eyes of your daughter, how cool is that? A sensational game. And so what was the atmosphere like?
Oh, it was great. I think there's like 11,000 in the barn, and Rosie, like when that place is full, man, it's just magic. Like it's the best. And I did think back, like my formative sports going experiences when I was a kid was my dad and I would go down to Williams and we'd get a ticket to go see Vashon Leonard or Townsend Moore, like those teams. And back then, we could only go to the Penn State game, Rosie, because we couldn't afford the tickets to go to any of the other ones. That was the ticket that we could get outside. Right. We'd scalp it, and then we'd get in, and we'd be, behind a beam in Williams, and you're looking around it and trying to find. But like that,
the charm of Williams Arena. Yes.
Yeah, those experiences when I was 11, 12, 13 years old were like, that's what made me love sports. Like, that's what made me want to do all of this. And my daughter plays basketball and soccer, and she's an athlete. And so to bring her to a big time game where there are 11,000 people all going crazy for the Gophers, the Gopher women, by the way, like,
right.
And watching a women's team come through in the clutch like this, like, I absolutely was just so heartened to see my daughter in that arena looking and saying, this is normal for women's athletes to be supported like this. And
isn't that cool?
And it was great. And, Braun hits the step back and Battle hits the baseline jumper to win it. And I'm lifting her up in my arms and everyone's going crazy. And like, I hope and I think like we're going to remember that game for the rest of our lives. And
well, you give me goosebumps. Those are memories. I going back when I had memories with my dad going to certain sporting events and then taking my son and my daughter, my daughter to playoff games, and my son to Timberwolf, 2004. We still talk about it like it happened yesterday when he was in high school and we were watching the Wolves go to the NBA Western Conference Finals. And for young girls to have their own role models, and Minnesota girls kind of getting it done. You mentioned Battle and Braun, and they did it, and looked like Mississippi had control of that game in the fourth quarter, and they did. They were playing really well defensively. They didn't seem to be rattled at all by the crowd, and all of a sudden the Gophers found a way, and now they're on their way to face probably going to be the toughest I went to the UCLA game when they played them here and they get smoked, but UCLA is one of the top 3 teams in the country, but it doesn't matter. I mean, they're on their way to the Sweet 16 in Sacramento, and it's the memories you have from yesterday that make a difference, and that was so cool. And they're building something over there.
Yeah, they are. I mean, Don does a great job. I do want to like give Lindsay Whalen her props as well because she brought in a lot of those women in their recruiting, and they've turned into great players there. But you hit it, Rosie. Like, Battle, Braun, and Hart all coming from Minnesota, all staying home to play for their hometown team, all really showing any girls that there is a pathway to real success at the collegiate level by coming up and playing basketball in Minnesota and then staying here. I'd have zero problems with Paige Beckers or whoever going to UConn.
Of course.
Or, you just do Madden Greenway going to Kentucky for, I'm sure, a bunch of money and all that. So that's awesome. Like, do what you can. But like, it does mean a little bit more, I think, when you have Minnesota women who came up through the ranks in Minnesota and then are doing it with Minnesota across their chests and coming through like that. Like, that's really, really cool. And so, I was telling, Nita as we were walking out, is like, all these girls just you were in their shoes, when they were your age. So, just dream about it, just have fun with it and think about it. It's really cool.
And of course, we have the Minnesota Lynx. We know the success they've had over the years here with Cheryl Reeve as the head coach. They just the WNBA just signed a new collective bargaining agreement, and it's like, whoa,
yeah,
they're going to get a nice pay raise. I'm not sure how this is all going to work, but season will be on, and the Lynx expectations will be sky high, and so your daughter and others will have ample opportunity to go watch the Lynx here before we know it.
No doubt. And I think they have the number 2 pick in the draft too, right? Like,
that's right. They do.
Yeah. So,
unusual.
Cheryl Reeve's done a great job. I thought last year was a heck of a lot of fun with that group, and getting Nafisa Collier back from injury will be great. And that is a very likable team as well. And so it will be that will be a cool watch to see how they kind of come back and like talk about the Wild West with like the collective bargaining agreement just coming into place, and everybody in the league is essentially a free agent. So it's
right.
It's like, it's going to be a land rush kind of thing going on. So it's going to be hectic and fun, and like, the business of it is going to be interesting to watch, Rosie, because now that money is starting to come in, and so the coverage is going to change, and things are going to be different that they're all going to have to adjust to. But it's really good basketball. That's the bottom line, is like, you can watch these games now, and the talent level is really, really high, and that's just been a really cool thing to see how it has evolved.
Yeah, I mean, the name recognition is getting to that point now in the WNBA, and we know that better. No one knows it better than the Lynx, with Nafisa Collier in particular, and the superstar that she's becoming on and off the court. I mean, that is, to me, the biggest change from even watching the Lynx win those championships before with the Maya Moores and Simone Augustus's and the Lindsay Whalens. They all had terrific resumes, but now you see someone like Nafisa Collier, who's turning into a businesswoman beyond her athletic ability, and you understand the direction that a lot of these players, the opportunities that they do have and take advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, she did. She essentially started the 3-on-3 Unrivaled League, and like has had a lot of success with that. The other thing that was very kind of cool to watch is how much of a voice that Nafisa had in the collective bargaining agreement negotiations, and how very assertive that she was, and that many of her star colleagues were, in terms of like setting the expectations for what they thought they deserved in the financial improvements that they've had. And so she carries herself incredibly, incredibly well as a player, as a leader, as a businesswoman, as a mother, as a wife, like all of those things. Like, she is the total package when it comes to anything you could want from a star player. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how she comes back from her surgeries and and gets back out there. But for the Lynx to go and transition relatively quickly from more Waylon Augustus fouls to Brunson to have Nafisa as the next face. I mean, it's like the Packers going from Favre to Rodgers to Jordan Love. Like that's just what great organizations do, and that's what the Lynx have become here.
Well, before we get you out of here, speaking of quarterbacks, the Vikings are always in the news, and this has been maybe a lull for a week or so that we have. I was out at TCO this past week when they had really cool, emotional kind of retirement celebration for Adam Thielen and C.J. Ham, both signing, as they say, one-day contracts, but they're paths that crossed over as free agents and playing in Minnesota. It's just an unusual set of circumstances that we may never, ever see again. So it was really cool to talk to those guys. But the quarterback situation for the Vikings, it's sort of set already. They signed Carson Wentz, and people are going, the hell are they doing signing Carson Wentz? I mean, I know he's healthy again with Kyler Murray already signed and J.J. McCarthy out in California working with his quarterback guru. How do you sort of see this thing settling out? And is there going to be a true competition starting with OTAs and minicamp and through training camp and through the preseason for KOC to decide, or is it already in cement that Kyler Murray is going to be the opening day quarterback for the Vikings?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'd be shocked, Rosie, if Kyler Murray was not the opening day quarterback. I mean, he doesn't commit as quickly as he did if there was any other kind of possibility. Now, I understand why they say that it is going to be a competition, because there is still a possibility that J.J. McCarthy is the long-term answer at quarterback, and you don't want to alienate him and just kind of throw him off to the wayside. But you also have to acknowledge that last year there were plenty of evidence that he was not quite ready for prime time in terms of playing on a team that wants to win playoff games. And so maybe this is a little motivation as well. But when you look at the room in general, I was surprised at some of the analysis of the Carson Wentz signing and be like, well, they're giving him $3 million. He's not going to be the number 3 quarterback, but I kind of think he is, Rosie. And it makes sense to me because Kyler Murray is probably your starter. He's had injury issues. He's a smaller quarterback. J.J. McCarthy, as the backup, has had injury issues. He is a slighter framed quarterback. And so if you have a couple of guys in your room who are, I think, both very talented, but both prone to injury, having a third guy who has been in this offense, has done it the way that Carson Wentz has, I think he's the classic in case of emergency break glass type of a guy. I don't think it would have been the right thing to have Max Brosmer as your third quarterback.
No.
When it is very conceivable that you could lose both of your top 2 to injury or ineffectiveness, and then you need a third guy. And so I like the room as it is right now. I think it's a good mix of veterans and high ceiling and kind of steady and potential and all of that. And we'll see how it all shakes out. But when we get to week 1, I would be gobsmacked if J.J. McCarthy is starting over Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I agree. But that, like you said, I think it gives him a real insurance policy. Carson Wentz obviously knows the offense inside and out already, and he's not going to have to learn from scratch like Kyler Murray is. But all things, and the Vikings may still sign a free agent or two. They're not going to spend a lot of money in anyone. They got themselves a new offensive lineman as a backup, which was a good thing. They had signed him to an offer sheet. They got a new punter. They got a few other things as well. But it all points to the draft, and this is such a huge draft for the Vikings. We know the swing and misses they've had. Rob Brzezinski is the acting general manager right now, but we know that the people in the room with KOC and Brian Flores and their pro scouts are going to have to make. They got their draft capital right now and potentially make something happen, but they cannot swing and miss over pretty much any of these guys, especially the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, they have to hit. They have to get some young players in who can be starting caliber players. Maybe they don't have to be all pro players right away, but get guys in here who can give you real snaps and real contributions right away. And that was Kwesi's biggest downfall. That's why he's not here anymore. Mm-hmm. It is interesting the way that they've gone about it. You and I have both known Rob Brzezinski for years and years. Yeah. I think he's a really good leader, great voice to have at the top of the food chain. It's just very interesting that they're kind of going on this sort of interim path into the draft. And then, they'll figure out what they're going to do for the long term after it. So there's a lot of pressure on this coaching staff, on this scout staff, on Rob Brzezinski to make sound decisions for the long-term health of this franchise when we don't really know who's going to be leading that front office for the long term. So how that all works will be interesting, but Rob is the perfect guy to have in that position. If you're looking for someone to do it in a selfless manner and do what's right for the organization, Rob is going to do that. But yeah, there's a lot riding on this draft. They have to come out of this with 3 guys that can really help you sooner than later.
Well, the Vikings will be in the news. They always are. The draft will be coming up. The end of free agency. We got the Wild, the Wolves, Gopher women's basketball. Oh, and by the way, the Twins are starting their season. It's almost like, and I'm such a big baseball fan, but just feel like, oh man, did they play this week? And you kind of going, who are these guys? You know the lineup a little bit, but man, it's going to be a tough sell out there. You want to comment? That's fine. I just feel like, and I love going to Target Field with my daughter, and I love going to games. I love the atmosphere out there, but oh man, to get the average fan out there with everything, when the weather gets nice and everyone wants to be outside, good luck. That's all I can say.
Yeah, it's tough over there right now, Rosie. When ownership loses the faith and trust of the fans, it's just a really tough spot. Now, our friend Patrick Royce wrote a column, which I think is right, on Sunday. Like, a lot of times when you think about the Twins, it seems like some of their better years come when you don't expect anything from them. It's
happened
like,
in
whoa,
87.
where did this come from?
Yeah.
And maybe you get a little surprise out of them this year. But yeah, I think that there's going to be plenty of good seats available all the time over there, throughout this summer. And maybe, unfortunately, the weather is going to be the biggest draw a lot of those days that you want to sit out and have a beer and watch a game. But yeah,
you won't have to spend the $26 that you spent at Williams Arena yesterday to get into Target Field. Let me put it that way.
That's
You'll
right.
be able to get a better seat.
Hey, I'll take advantage of that a few times.
Exactly.
I think. But yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Well, Johnny Krawczynski, Johnny Athletic, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you spending some time at Rosen Sports Monday, covering all the bases here from what we discussed today. And again, our deepest condolences to the Jessi Pierce family. And we started with that. We'll end with it. Our hearts and prayers go out to everyone associated with their family, and Godspeed, as they say. Johnny, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Rosie.
Okay, take care.